This is the greatest pyramid in the world, built over 4,500 years ago. Its purpose still remains a mystery, and in 2025 a hidden chamber was discovered inside. The entrance to the chamber is here, hidden behind this massive stone. And inside, we find this incredible view, a newly discovered hidden chamber with ancient hieroglyphs covering the walls. It's hard to imagine a more breathtaking sight than this, a dim golden torchlight illuminating these massive stones covered in hieroglyphs. The dust in the air gives it a hazy, mysterious feel. You can almost feel the weight of the ancient world pressing down on you. It's hard to believe that something so magnificent could still exist today. But it does, and it's a reminder that there are still so many mysteries yet to be uncovered. This is the Great Pyramid of Giza, and if you like this video, stay tuned for more.
The year is 2345 BCE. The pharaoh Khufu has just died after ruling Egypt for over 50 years. In the coming weeks, his body will be mummified and placed inside a magnificent stone chamber deep beneath the sands of time. This chamber would become known as the King's Chamber, the final resting place of one of the most powerful men in the ancient world. But that is not where our story begins. It actually begins almost 5,000 years later in the year 2025 AD, when scientists announced that they had found a pair of previously unknown hidden chambers inside the Great Pyramid of Giza. The discovery was made by an international team led by researchers from the University of Johannesburg using non-invasive technologies such as infrared cameras and cosmic ray scanning. These methods allowed them to peer into the pyramid without damaging its structure, which is exactly what needed to be done since the pyramid is 4,500 years old and, quite frankly, kind of fragile at this point. But there was a problem. The scans showed that the new chambers were completely empty. There was nothing inside of them except for a few small pebbles. So the scientists decided to drill 2 small holes into the chambers so they could send in tiny cameras to take pictures. What they found was shocking. Inside the first chamber was a small stone tablet covered in hieroglyphs. It appeared to have been deliberately placed inside the chamber before it was sealed up. But even more shocking was what they found inside the second chamber. Here, lying in the center of the room, was a large limestone box. It looked like a sarcophagus, but it was ornately carved with images of scarab beetles, which was sacred to the Egyptians. And if that wasn't enough, another smaller box was found near the wall. It was also decorated with beetle imagery. According to researchers, the objects hadn't been moved in thousands of years. They were still in their original place. What on earth did it all mean? Why were these chambers hidden, and what purpose did they serve? Well, according to the lead researcher, Dr. Arsos Subramanian, the boxes were probably used to hold offerings to the dead, similar to the ritual practices we see depicted in ancient artwork. Unfortunately, the team couldn't open either of the boxes since they were filled with nails, and due to safety concerns, they didn't want to risk damaging them. But not long after they published their results, the Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities announced that they would be opening the boxes in a controlled environment and broadcasting the event live to the world. Everyone tuned in to watch, but much to everyone's disappointment, the boxes were empty. There was nothing inside of them except for a few pieces of decayed wood. So why would anyone go through the effort of building secret chambers deep inside the pyramid only to fill them with wooden boxes that would eventually rot away? Well, we don't know for sure, but luckily, we don't need to guess. That's because the hieroglyphic tablet mentioned earlier provided us with the answer. Researchers carefully examined the markings on the stone and were able to translate them. Here's what they said: the place of offering for the 4th dynasty, the place where they performed the rituals for the Ca of Khufu, the place where they perform the rituals for the Ca. May the master of the 2 lands live forever like the sun for the 4th dynasty. Remember how I told you that the main chamber inside the pyramid was called the King's Chamber? Well, it turns out that's not actually true. Archaeologists now believe that it was actually meant to be a queen's chamber. They think it was originally called the Queen's Chamber, but over the centuries, the name got messed up and we started calling it the King's Chamber instead. But who's the pharaoh? If the chamber was built for the queen, then doesn't that mean that the secret chambers were intended for her as well? Well, yes, but not in the way you might think. You see, to the ancient Egyptians, death was not the end. They believed that when someone died, their spirit continued on in a different form. They called this the. It was essentially an energy field that resided inside the body and contained the person's memories and personality. When the body died, the Ka would continue to exist separately and would need to be appeased in order for the deceased to find peace. So what better place to make an offering to the Caa than the place where the body was buried? By placing gifts inside of the chamber, the Egyptians believed they were giving the Ka everything it needed to thrive in the afterlife. But the inscriptions tell us there's more to the story. If you look closely at the hieroglyphs, you can see that they mention performing rituals, not just making offerings. What does that mean? Well, rituals could involve things like burning incense, making sacrifices, playing music, or even having religious ceremonies. It seems that the secret chambers were not only used as a burial ground but also as a place for worship. The idea was that by appeasing the CA of the dead, they would ensure a safe and comfortable journey into the afterlife. But why hide the chambers? Why keep them secret instead of building them somewhere more visible? Well, some researchers believe that the reason the chambers were hidden was to protect them from grave robbers. If the location of the chambers was known, then there was a chance that someone would try to dig them up and steal the treasures inside. By hiding them, the Egyptians reduced the likelihood that the chambers would be disturbed. Another theory is that the chambers were only meant to be used by priests and other members of the clergy. In this scenario, the chambers would have been considered sacred and off-limits to the general public. The priests would have used the chambers for secret rituals that were only meant for their eyes and ears. But who was Khufu's wife? We know that she was the queen. But do we know anything else? Unfortunately, no. The only thing we know about her is that her name was possibly hidden. Her name comes from the name of one of Khufu's wives during his reign. But there's no evidence that they are related. It's possible that the archaeologists simply assumed that the queen was Khufu's wife. But we don't really know that for sure. There's a lot more to discover about the secret chambers. But one thing is clear, they're not just a burial ground. They're also a place of worship, a place where the Egyptians kept the memory of their dead alive by performing rituals and making offerings to their king. It has a fascinating glimpse into one of the most mysterious cultures in history, and it shows us that the ancient Egyptians were much more advanced than we give them credit for. As always, thanks so much for watching. Which do you think is the most interesting fact revealed in this video? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Also, be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.